Hello everyone, I'm MrEliMac and welcome back to Pitch This here on the channel. This is the show where I pitch a movie or television show idea that I would love to see get made. But before I get into the idea, please don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It really helps me and this video get out to more people, and I would love for more people to watch this video. I really would. Also, hit the notification bell, that way you can be notified whenever a video like this goes live. Because I love these videos getting out to everyone out there. So, we are starting out a new month here on Pitch This. I'm very excited. You can't tell by my shirt, this is sort of a hint of what this month has to offer, because the month of August is going to be dedicated to Spider-Man-esque movie pitches. Because again, August, or at least this month of this year of 2022, this is the 60th anniversary of Spider-Man. So throughout August, I want to dedicate it to only Spider-Man related pitches. So it's going to be Spider characters, mainly different alternate versions of Spider-Man. And again, I cannot wait to pitch all these videos to you. It's going to be 5 this month because there are 5 Wednesdays in this month of August. So to get started, this week, I'm going to be going to Marvel's Earth 982, and I'm going to be combining it with the Raimi-verse of Spider-Man. And if no one knows what Earth 982 is, it is the Earth of the MC2, which is sort of a continuation of the MCU that was introduced in one of the What If comics. So, if you want to know what if issue that is about, it is going to be centered around a character known as Mayday Parker, aka Spider-Girl. And yes, I will be making this a continuation of the Sam Raimi Spider-Man universe. And this is an alternate idea to not having a Spider-Man 4, because after watching Spider-Man No Way Home, I really didn't want to do a Spider-Man 4. Instead, I always had the idea of what if Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man was actually the universe where Mayday Parker was born. So that was always my idea. I always had it in my head that Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man was the Spider-Man that, you know, had May Parker, like, had a child, and, like, the child would later on become Spider-Girl. So this is very much what this pitch is going to be, and it's going to be based on that idea. And again, this video is that idea, and I'm so looking forward to hearing what everyone has to say after getting to the end of this pitch. And I'm very much excited to have everyone hear the idea that I have. So without any further ado, let's get into the pitch for Spider-Girl. And so we start with a shot outside of a high school, mainly Midtown High School. And it's night, and there are multiple cars parked outside in the parking lot. And so we have the camera slowly move around the cars, getting closer and closer to the high school. And during this period, we would hear a female narrate what's happening. And she would say something like this: "Who am I? You sure you want to know? The story of my life is well known, or at least my dad's is." With that line, we're in the gym as the girls' Midtown High School basketball game is being played. And the crowd cheers as one of the Midtown High players makes a 3-point shot, and everyone's on their feet. Oh my God, she made it! And so the camera would then move over to Peter Parker sitting next to Mary Jane Watson Parker. And then the narration would continue. "Yeah, that's my dad. He's pretty cool to the world, and my mom's pretty cool too. She was a famous Broadway actress before being let go. Now she's a fashion designer, and my dad's, well, you all know who he is. But I'm guessing you need to know who I am as well." And Peter stands up and cheers as the camera spins around to focus on Mayday Parker dribbling the ball down the court. She maneuvers around a few girls and passes the ball to her teammate, who makes a layup. And the crowd cheers as the buzzer goes off to signify a timeout. Mayday gives her teammate a high five, and she starts going over to her coach, and then she continues to narrate. "That's me, Mayday Parker. From what my mom told me, I'm nothing like my dad was in high school, but I still make him proud. Oh, sorry, I need to get back to the game." And Mayday huddles with her teammates and her coach, Flash Thompson. and the coach hypes them up and tells them to go out there and kick some ass, and they all put their hands together and it's like, on three, Midtown on three, 1, 2, 3, Midtown, and they break out of the huddle and they get back to playing the game. The clock quickly runs down. Mayday has passed the ball. She starts dribbling down. She jumps up as high as she can and she reaches for the hoop easily and slams the ball down, breaking the backboard. And time runs out and Midtown High wins the big basketball game, and the crowd stands up on their feet and they cheer as loud as they can. But Peter and Mary Jane stare on with worried looks on their faces. Peter looks at Mary Jane and asks if Mayday's been developing powers, and Mary Jane states that she doesn't know. And after a few minutes, Mayday exits the locker room with her friends Davida Kirby and Courtney Duran. Mayday talks to them about the game, but Courtney talks about how Mayday broke the backboard. But suddenly, after that, Heather Noble, a school bully who's also a cheerleader, walks up and talks about the backboard as well. She even cites that Mayday is living up to her nickname. However, Davida chimes in and defends her friend. Heather rolls her eyes and walks away. And the three friends continue the talk until Peter calls out to Mayday. She says goodbye to her friends and runs up to her parents. She hugs her dad and steps into the car. Peter steps in and drives off with Mary Jane in the passenger side. When they arrive at their home, Peter and Mary Jane enter, seeing the babysitter slowly place baby Benji Parker into his crib. The babysitter waves at them and leaves after getting paid. Peter asks to talk to Mayday, and they talk about the backboard situation. And Mayday mentions how she doesn't know how that happened, but she thought it was pretty cool. And Peter tells her that she needs to be careful if that happens again. And she just tells him that she will be safe. Just gotta trust her. And the two end their conversation, and Peter walks out of her room. And after he walks out of her room, her phone begins to chime and she sees a text from her friend, Jimmy Yama. And the two begin to text each other for a moment about the game, and she tells him about the backboard incident. She even sends him a picture that someone took of her doing that. And she tells him that they'll talk more about it at school tomorrow. She goes to the bathroom and starts washing her face, but when trying to put the washcloth down, she notices that it stays stuck to her hand. She shakes her hand rapidly, but the washcloth doesn't move. And after a few minutes, she can finally get it removed. And she looks at her hands and starts noticing hairs, similar to Peter's from Spider-Man 1, slowly grow from her hands. She looks at the bathroom ceiling and she just shrugs and jumps up. She places her hand up on the ceiling and it sticks. She chuckles as she drops down. And after that, we cut back to Peter talking to Mary Jane, and he talks about how he's nervous that Mayday may be developing spider powers as well. But Mary Jane tries to comfort him, but he mentions that he has a colleague that may know what is happening to her. And Mary Jane tells him not to go to his friend. But Peter tells her that he'll be the only person that knows anything else about genetics. Mary Jane relents and tells Peter to be safe when he meets with his friend. He says that he will and tells her that after meeting with her, he'll tell Mayday about Spider-Man. And so the next day, Mayday meets with Davida and Courtney at school, and she talks to them about what happened at home last night, how she was able to jump up and stick to the ceiling with just her hands, not trying anything else. And Davida and Courtney have both seemed shocked, but they don't question her at all. And meanwhile, Jimmy and Weston meet up with them, and they join in the conversation. This leads to Jimmy wanting her to use her powers in school, but she refuses, not wanting to get into any trouble. And so we later cut to Peter entering a large building and going to meet a friend of his. This is where we meet Roderick Kingsley, a premier scientist that bought Oscorp after the events of Spider-Man 3. And during that time, Peter started a friendship with him, trying to make sure that the secrets of the Osborns never get out. And so the two have a discussion about what would happen if someone like Spider-Man were to have kids. Would it be possible for his kids to start developing powers? And so Roderick is shocked to see Peter not knowing what would happen. I mean, Roderick explains that Spider-Man most likely had his genetics changed with something, and especially when he started to show his powers. And because of this, that means that there is a high likelihood that those genetics would be passed down to the next generation. And upon hearing this, Peter thanks Roderick and leaves. And once Peter leaves, Roderick pulls out his cell phone and tells someone to watch the Parker household. And he then meets with Norman Osborn, who has since been cured ever since the end of Spider-Man No Way Home. Again, I'm putting it all together. This is also set after Spider-Man No Way Home. And Norman is begging to buy his company back. He even has a check ready to sign. All he has to do is sign his name. But Roderick tells Norman that the company went bankrupt under his watch. Roderick later explains that Norman's research was going nowhere to begin with. Norman tries to defend it, but Roderick has security take Norman away. And once Norman is gone, Roderick opens the file that shows the formula that Norman worked on to become the Green Goblin. And so later after school, Mayday goes to basketball practice and notices some changes happening to her body. Like she's not feeling well, like she's noticing her hands are trembling, she's sweating a lot. She asks Coach Thompson if she could be excused early, and Flash allows it, seeing that she's not feeling well. DeVito watches her leave as Mayday tries to keep her cool. Mayday looks at a wall outside and decides to climb it. And as she's climbing, she's, again, like freaking out. She's shocked and she's elated that something like this is happening to her. And once she gets to the roof of the building, she chuckles to herself. And then she notices something on her wrist, and she sees a white dot right below the palm of her hand, like right here. She looks confused and accidentally positions her hand like Spider-Man's hand, and a web shoots out of her wrist. And she comments on how that's gross, but decides to practice web slinging. And so she web slings all the way home and sees her parents in the living room waiting on her. Peter asks Mayday to sit down. And so Mayday does, and Peter finally tells her that he was Spider-Man. And he explains everything that happened with Uncle Ben, the Osborns, everything. And he tells her that she's developing his powers as well. He tells her that she needs to keep them a secret from her friend. But Mayday tries to convince him that it's okay that they know. However, Mary Jane says that if they know her secret, they are at risk of being hurt as well. And Mayday tells them that it's not fair, and that just because Peter kept it a secret doesn't mean that she needs to. And as Mayday leaves the living room, Peter stands up and tells her that with her great power, she has the responsibility to keep it a secret. And that with great power, there must also come great responsibility. And after hearing that, Mayday stands for a second, and she slowly begins to walk up the steps. But then after that, boom! The wall explodes, and Peter and Mary Jane are shot back to the kitchen. Peter is able to successfully protect Mary Jane from getting hurt. And Peter looks up at Mayday and tells her to get her brother to safety. And Peter looks up and sees a person dressed like the Green Goblin from Spider-Man 1. So it's like that suit, the Power Ranger-esque suit that no one likes. Yeah, it's that suit, but the suit is orange. And Peter asks if it was Norman, but the figure says no. Mary Jane runs out of the house as fast as she can. And then Mayday, after hearing everything, she runs up to Benji's room and quickly gets him out of the house. And as she does that, Peter faces off against this hobgoblin. And so Peter is able to get the upper hand until Hobgoblin stabs him in the arm and swipes the glider to cut off Peter's leg. Peter is trying to keep the blood from spilling out, and he gets something and starts holding it down. And Hobgoblin pulls out an energy sword. He looks down at Peter and says, "Goodbye, Spider-Man." And as he begins to swing down, Mayday swings in and starts fighting off against the Hobgoblin. Mayday webs up the glider and causing it to go haywire. And Hobgoblin snarls and quickly retreats, telling him that this isn't over. Mayday looks at her dad and quickly runs to him. And then we cut to Peter in the hospital getting his leg bandaged. Mary Jane, carrying Benji, and Mayday sit in the waiting area. The doctor walks in and tells them that Peter's stable, and that he was lucky to make it to the hospital as soon as he did. The doctor walks away as the three walk in to see Peter. Peter assures them that he's okay and that this is just another thing of his Peter Parker luck. Mary Jane asks if he thinks Norman or Harry has gone down the dark path again, but Peter tells her that he fixed them. They should be okay. Peter looks at Mayday and tells her that she did well. Meanwhile, back with Hobgoblin, he lands his glider in a hidden base and tries to take the web off of the glider. And he hears a voice, and he looks over to see Roderick Kingsley asking if he killed Spider-Man. Hobgoblin shakes his head and takes off his helmet. Roderick tells Jason Macendale that they had an agreement, and Macendale says that he'll get the job done. It's just all this old gear that Kingsley gave him just hit a snag. And Roderick tells him to get it fixed. And Macendale asks if he knew that there was another spider person. Roderick turns around, intrigued. He replies that he didn't, but this could work to their advantage. He tells Macendale to avoid the Parkers for a bit, but instead terrorize the city. This might help them in the long run. Back at the hospital, Mayday sits next to Peter, and Peter wakes her up and tells her that he has a gift for her in the attic. Mayday is confused, but Peter tells her that he had a theory that she developed powers in high school, so he made her something just in case she wanted to do something with her powers. Mayday says that she doesn't want to leave his side, but Peter tells her that because this new goblin is around, she's going to need to be prepared to help people. Because with great power, and before he can finish, she finishes for him, saying, must also come great responsibility. He smiles and hugs her. So Mayday goes back home and walks up to the attic. And as he walks through the attic, she sees pictures of Peter with Aunt May and Uncle Ben, of Peter with Harry, and of Peter and Mary Jane's wedding. She smiles at the photo of Peter with a baby Mayday in his arms. She looks over and sees the chest with her name on it. She opens the chest and sees a spider suit made for her. She smiles as we zoom into one of the eyes of the suit, and we see Spider-Girl swinging through the air. And she goes about the rest of the movie saving multiple places, saving the day, and trying to live her life as a teenager as Davida, Courtney, Jimmy, and Wes keep her secret. But this is until she has another sighting of the Hobgoblin. She and Hobgoblin fight until it's obvious that Hobgoblin is losing. Watching the entire thing, Roderick Kingsley tells Macendale that he's been fired, and the glider stops midair and throws Macendale into a building. And the glider flies off as Roderick presses a button in his office. And with this button, a beeping goes off in the suit, and Macendale tries to get it off as fast as possible, but this blows Macendale up as Spider-Girl can only watch what happens. Mayday would go meet with her father about what happened, and he'd be as confused as she was. This would be when Norman Osborn would walk in to check on Peter. And though they resolved their issues in Spider-Man No Way Home, there is still a slight tension with Peter. Norman understands this, but still tells Peter that he may know who is behind the Hobgoblin. Norman explains that Roderick Kingsley has been keeping some projects hidden from his investors, but Peter is hesitant to believe that Roderick would do something like this. Norman explains that the project that turned Norman into the Green Goblin has been missing from all files. Norman mentions that he had never hidden the fact that he made this project, but suddenly it's gone. Mayday begins to agree with Norman, and Peter relents and tells Mayday to just investigate and not engage. And that night, Spider-Girl investigates Roderick Kingsley and tries to find any hints that could lead to the Goblin Project. She later hears a voice as he hides in the shadows. He later tells her that it's funny the daughter of Peter Parker is willing to decide to be a hero. She could be living a normal life, but she's putting on a costume. Mayday tries to explain that if he's responsible for all this, he'll go to jail. And Roderick later says, well, if that's the case, I better turn myself in then. And he throws something from out of the shadows, and she sees that it's a pumpkin bomb. She ducks behind the desk as it blows up. She looks up from behind the desk, trying to regain her balance, as Roderick Kingsley hovers out of the darkness with a new goblin glider and an improved hobgoblin armor. For reference, it looks a little bit more like the comic accurate suit like the blue chainmail, the orange like hoodie thing, but he's not wearing the hobgoblin mask. And Roderick tells her that he's been wanting to kill Peter Parker since the moment they met. Roderick begins to throw more pumpkin bombs, causing Spider-Girl to evade all of them. He continues to explain that he's been wanting to dissect Peter so that he can see how to recreate the spider that bit him. But now that Mayday has his powers, he can kill her instead. And Spider-Girl is able to escape and swing away, but Roderick is able to reach her with his glider. The two fight, and Roderick is able to get the advantage. Roderick looks down at her nearly broken body and tells her that he's not going to kill her yet. No, first, he's going to kill her family. And he's going to make sure that Spider-Girl knows what he did. So he flies off, but Spider-Girl is able to shoot out her web, attach it to the glider, and pull herself up to the glider and destroys it, causing them both to fall into an abandoned warehouse, similar to the one in the first Spider-Man movie. Spider-Girl tries to reason with him and tries to tell him that the Goblin formula is twisting his mind. However, Roderick tells her that he was able to readjust the formula and says that he is in full control. He has all of Green Goblin's powers and none of his weaknesses. So the two fight hand to hand, with Roderick getting the advantage again. Roderick walks over to the glider and pulls out his energy sword. He looks down at her and tells her that this is for her own good. Spider-Man must die, and it is his responsibility to kill him. Spider-Girl is able to avoid the sword swing, and she's able to get her second wind. She beats Roderick down and leaves him broken. She grabs the sword and has a chance to kill him. And after a beat, she remembers her father's words, that with great power must also come great responsibility. And she throws the sword away. She tells him that with her great power, that it is her responsibility to take him in. And Roderick doesn't like this at all, and so he presses a button on his gauntlet, causing the glider to go attack Spider-Girl. But Spider-Girl is able to duck as the glider rams into Roderick, killing him. Spider-Girl looks at him as the blood falls out of his mouth. A week passes, and Peter is out of the hospital with a prosthetic leg. And he has to walk with a cane now, and he reassures his family that his days as Spider-Man are over. However, he mentions that he doesn't need to be the hero anymore. That there's another one that'll do a lot better than he ever did. And we end with the web-slinging Spider-Girl swinging through Manhattan as she narrates, "Whatever life holds in store for me, I'll never forget what my dad told me. This is my gift, and I'm not throwing it away. Who am I? I'm Spider-Girl." And we zoom in into one of her eyes as we cut to black. And that is how I would make Spider-Girl. And no, there isn't a post-credit scene because I didn't want to set something up that I wouldn't continue. And by that, I mean I'm not going to be doing a pitch for Spider-Girl 2. No, I'm not going to worry about that. In this Spider-Girl movie, it's very much an homage film to the original 2002 Spider-Man, whilst also trying to be its own movie. And would I have Danny Elfman compose the score? I would definitely try. But would I have Sam Raimi direct it? Probably not. However, I think this is a great way to do a Spider-Girl movie whilst also continuing the story of Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man. And I just hope that I was able to make some fans happy about being able to find a way to have Spider-Girl appear in this movie. But next week, we are going to be jumping over to another universe in the multiverse, which is more associated with Earth 1610. And if you don't know what Earth that is, well, you'll have to find out next week. So, what were your thoughts on the pitch? Did you like it? Did you hate it? Were you indifferent to it? Whatever your thoughts, post them in the comments down below. Also, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Also, hit the notification bell. That way you can be notified whenever a new video like this goes live. Until next week, I've been MrEliMac, and you've been the audience, and I hope you all have a great rest of the day.